time, yeah, making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time, yeah. So be sure to grab your tea, grab a seat, and tune in to Miss Liz. Tea time, making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time, yeah. Tea time.
Well, welcome to Tea Time. We are here for the evening tea time. And yes, we are early tonight for all of my listeners out there. We just switch it up once in a while. We just got to keep you on your toes. So I want to really thank everybody for tuning in a little earlier tonight because Bob Brill is in the studio and he's an award-winning newscaster, and author, filmmaker. He's all of that good stuff. And we're going to talk about the tattoo murder. So we're going to talk about his books, his career, all of that good stuff. So if you haven't subscribed to Miss Liz's YouTube channel yet, please do that. Ring that little bell and you'll be notified every time there's a new tea time going up. Also, if you haven't heard of Miss Liz, you can check out the website at www.misslizsteatime. All the tea time guests are listed there. So if you want to RSVP all of the new guests that are coming up this month in November as well, you can do that. So now let me get the disclaimer in there, and then we're going to get a little bit of Bob's bio out, and we're going to get Bob in here, and he's going to spill us a different and interesting cup of tea tonight. So the disclaimer for Miss Liz's live show. Miss Liz myself is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment, please grant StreamYard permission to see your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that the content brought forward for any tea time show hosted by myself, Miss Liz, is always brought forward in good faith. However, may bring forward dialogues and opinions that are not representative of my platform. The facts and information are perceived to be accurate at the giving time of airing. All tea time guests and audience participants are responsible for using their good judgment in taking any action that may relate to the discussion. The content brought forward may include discussions for some where they may be emotionally at risk. It's significant to know that the show is engaging in discussion forums only to offer inspire awareness and connection and is not providing therapeutical advice. If you have any questions about the disclaimer or the panelist discussion, you may freely contact me, Miss Liz, through my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com. Moving forward, should you choose to voluntarily participate in tonight's show in any aspect, I myself, Miss Liz, welcomes you. And should you decide that the show is not made for you at this time, I respect those wishes and will see you at a later show at a later date and time. And again, all tea times in 2023 are done on Thursday, 10, 3, and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, unless we do surprise shows like tonight. So stay tuned to the Facebook page for all of that update. Now, a little bit on Bob. Who is Bob Brill? Well, Bob Brill is an award-winning newscaster, author, and filmmaker working in radio for decades. Bob is a new news anchor and reporter at the All News radio station in Los Angeles. He has written 12 books, produced numerous short films and podcasts, and has written about 20 screenplays and pilots. A sports entourist, Bob is a die-hard fan of his hometown teams, which includes the Pittsburgh Steelers, Pirates, and Penguins. His childhood desires to play Major League Baseball are captured in his youthful memoir, Tales of My Baseball Youth, a child of the 60s. He continues to write a popular weekly blog, Baseball in the 1960s. Among his books are Six of the Lancers, Hero of the West, series of Western novels. He's written number 7 now, and The Tattoo Murder, which he considers his best written work to date. His first book, Fans Letters to a Stripper, A Paddy Wagon Tale, is a coffee table biography about the life and time of a big time burlesque queen and her major league pitcher husband, Don Rudolph. Bob has optioned the book and a screenplay and hopes to see it make it into a streaming production within the next 2 years. A podcast is available based on Bob's screenplay about the couple's lives called Major League Stripper. For more on Bob's bio, you can check out Miss Liz's Facebook page. The whole bio is there. Crazy, crazy bio, but he's done amazing things. So check that out. I'm going to get Bob in here and I'm going to sip on my tea a little, and we're going to get this tea time going. Welcome, Bob.
Well, thank you, Liz. Yeah, I have to, before you say anything, I have to say thank you for going early, because we're going early because, as you mentioned, I'm a Big Ten Penguins fan, and my company got a suite for a bunch of us tonight at the Penguins Kings game at Crypto.com Arena. And so with LA traffic, I have to leave earlier than I normally would. So thank you so much for going a little bit early. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, and it keeps my guests and my listeners on their toes too. Pay attention, right? Because you just never know what's going to happen.
I appreciate you understand how a hockey game takes precedent.
Right? Absolutely. I haven't been to a good hockey game in years, and I need to go to one. I think the last one I went to was it 10 years ago, 12 years ago?
That's about where I was too, and it was the Penguins and Kings. So like a luxury suite. That's just,
So, Bob, I want to get in this tea time going. So, I want to know who you were as a little guy and who you are now as a grown man.
wow. As a little guy, all right. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that's where I was born, and we moved back and forth to California, starting at the time I was, I guess, about 6 years old, 7 years old. Well, but yeah, about that. And I always loved sports. I love baseball, especially, but I love to write. And even back then, I think I got my start. I wrote when I was about 6 or 7. I started writing jokes for family members, and I was a cute little kid, so they laughed. So that is just encouraged me. If they weren't funny, they laughed, and that said, "Hey, I'm okay." And then I got into radio because when I was in elementary school, I had to write an assignment on what we wanted to do in life. And, my whole thing was I wanted to play baseball. And I had a teacher, Mrs. Dunn, who asked me, well, what's your backup? And I said, well, what's a backup? And she said, well, if you don't play baseball. And I said, well, I thought about it. I said, well, how can I stay close to baseball? And I came up with the idea of, okay, I could be a play-by-play announcer. And I love listening to play-by-play radio then. And there are many times I will listen to a game on the radio now, or streaming now, which is the same thing, as opposed to watching on television. And because I love that part of it and have done some. But then eventually I got into radio and right out of high school, and I've been doing it ever since. And so today, who am I? I guess today I'm that guy who has lived a full life and has a lot of experience. But I'm planning on only being halfway through my life. I'm planning on living to 120, as long as the world plans on be here at that point. And but no, I really do think that I with today's technology and everything, I could possibly live that long, and I'd like to, and share that experience and do the things that I've always wanted to do that I wasn't able to do in the first half of my life, in the second half of my life, and which is writing and producing and filmmaking and writing more books. And because I do love to write, I'm right now deep in writing the 7th Lancer book, which is the Virginia City affair, and hopefully that will be out probably in February, around that time, maybe sooner, maybe later, but around that time. That's what I shoot for. And then I get started on the Tattoo Murder sequel, which is called The Belt Buckle Murder, and that'll probably take me the longest of any of the books I've ever written. Usually I'm bam, 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 but that one takes so much interaction and development that it'll probably take me a year to write it. I hope not that long, but and maybe. The first one sat on the shelf after I wrote it for 10 years, and before I went back and refined it in 30 days, and it got out there, and it's like you said, I consider it my best work ever.
Well, before we went live, you were saying that it took 10 years for the book that we're going to be talking about tonight, right?
Yeah, yeah. I wrote it back in 2011, I think it was, and I I started out wanting to write a crime novel, and it would have been my third or fourth book, I guess. And I decided what I was going to write it on. But it's always a challenge, and I wanted it to be racy. I wanted my character to be someone who was sort of a local James Bond type of guy when it came to the women, anyway. Um, and I wrote it, and I made the mistake, or maybe good fortune, of asking my daughter to read it. And she goes, "I can't read this. My dad wrote this." you know. And
I can't do it, Dad.
then I gave it to my sister, who's a little older than me, figuring, the adult. And she goes, "I can't read this. It's too racy. It's too," and she loves to read. And I said, "Oh, geez," And so I kind of let it sit on the shelf, and I wasn't sure where I wanted to go with it. So then I gave it to a friend of mine who happens to be a psychiatrist. So she's not my psychiatrist. I want to clear that up right away.
It's a friend of a friend.
Yeah. And she's a lovely lady, and I love her to death. And we'd see each other and stuff. And she asked if she could read it. I said, "Yeah, sure." And she called me back after she read it. She goes, "Bob, I couldn't put it down." She goes, "You need to get this out there." She goes, "I literally could not put it down. It's magnificent." And I said, "Well, thank you. I appreciate that." And I'd see her about a year later, and she'd say the same thing about, "You've got to get that book out there." So after about 8 or 9 years of plotting me, I said, "Okay, but I'll tone it down." And I really felt I had to tone down the sexual parts of it, the grittiness and the crime, and that has to stay because that's what it is,
Yeah.
And so I toned it down. Toned down the sex and the raciness of it, and people seem to love it. I mean, it's I like it better, to be honest with you. And that's part of the thing about when you start editing your work and you're writing. It's the old adage of slash the crap out of it. And once you get it down to bare bones, you've got something great. Well, I don't think that's always true, but because it's a 300-page book. Most of my books are 200, but there's a lot involved, and it is one of those things that I can't wait to start writing the sequel. The sequel's in my head. It's on partially outlined, and it's actually based on a case that I covered as a reporter in Fresno, California, back in the mid '80s. No, early '80s, because I left there in about 83, 84, somewhere there. An actual case. I'm going to change it around a lot, but the basics are there. That gave me the inspiration for it.
So where do you get some from your experiences in life, Bob, but where do you get the ideas for all these books? Because you've written a lot of books.
Yeah, and I've written a varied amount. I that's kind of one of the things about my life. I've always felt that I was versatile, and sometimes too versatile, but for my own good. But I a lot of times, believe it or not, especially with films, I'll be driving down the street and I'll just look out and I'll see a scene. It could be a lady with a dog. It could be, a guy giving me an ugly stare as he drives by in a car. It could be anything. It could be a plane going across the sky. And for some reason, it clicks in my head a story. And usually what I do is I'll drive on for another mile thinking about this, and then I'll pull over, I'll pull out my phone, and I'll record that into my voice recorder on my phone. So I have it. And then I'll go back to it and I'll get it off on in Word or whatever. So I have it on my computer, and I just develop a story from it. That's usually the way it happens. Now, often, no, I mean, not often. I'll say sometimes you hear a song that gives you some inspiration. I think that is very common. Um, and it happens occasionally. That happened to me before. And occasionally you'll hear someone telling a story, and that story kind of rings to the point where you get a bigger story out of it and you just kind of go with it. And that's kind of where I've always been. I love history. I came up with a saying years ago that I put on all my websites, that be a student of history, not a victim of it. And, basically, sort of like the old adage of, those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it, because you have to have that. And I love history, always have since I was just a little kid. And so a lot of what I tackle is somewhat historical, but not always.
Well, it's like you said, right? In history, if you don't learn it, you're going to repeat it, right?
Yeah. hmm
And that's what we see that's going on in the world today is people are not, they don't know their history. So they're just going out and repeating everything. Like,
It is. It's amazing. It's like we see the same conflicts over and over and over, the same mistakes being made over and over and over. And, it's not just in the rest of the world, it's in our own countries,
yeah.
And we see this over and over. It's like, and I guess, here, I'm going to tell you a real quick story. There was about 10 years ago, we had a young person who was working at a radio station I was working at. And the editor and I were talking about the two Germanys, in the 20th century. And she was a 4-year student on daddy's money at USC. And it was, it was one of those things that, she'd had 4 years of college, and it was just amazing. She looked up at us and she said, there were two Germanys. And we looked at her, it's like, what? When were there two Germanys? And I looked at it, did you not go 4 years to university? She goes, yeah. I said, you never knew that there were two. So I said, look, two things. I understand Russian communism, Soviet communism was a 20th century phenomenon. Started in 1917, ended in 1989, technically. I understand you were born after the wall came down in Berlin, but how could you not know that there were two Germanys? I mean, it occupied half the 20th century, almost half. And it was like, it just amazed me. So that the fact that people don't latch on or don't understand history. Now, part of it's a school system. I mean, even when I was going to junior high and high school, we didn't get enough history. I was never satisfied with history. And I didn't go to college. So that kind of, washed that out. But it's getting back to your point. It's one of my pet peeves, as you can understand.
I'm like that too. I'm just like, really, guys? Like, come on, like, we have everybody going to school, but they're coming out not knowing anything. Like, what is going on here? Like, I one of my biggest pet peeves too. Like, I'm like, you guys don't know about that? How come you guys don't know about that? Like, you went to school, did you not? Like,
the other issue is I can't understand. I have to admit, I'm not up on language today, the current language.
Is that what we call it?
Texting one of my grandsons back and forth, and I texted. They live in Texas, and I texted him something, and he gave me this answer back, and I was like, "Okay, I have to go to the Urban Dictionary to find out what that is." and I still didn't understand it, and I was like, "Okay, I think." My wife said, "You just need to ask him." Explanation, please. And I understand. We had the same thing. I still have, growing up in the late 50s, mid 50s, early 60s, I still use the word man. Hey, man, how you doing? What's going on, man? And I understand that is a 70-year-old term, but it's in my vocabulary. But when somebody answers me 5 letters, and it's like, what does that stand for?
Right?
I don't know. And I have to go to the Urban Dictionary, which I now have on my phone, pull it up, okay, fine. So, but
Yeah.
it's
I don't even call that language anymore. I just call it a bunch of letters. And I'm just like, I'll tell you a funny story, Bob, is about it took me about 6 months. I kept seeing my nieces, my nephews, and my kids doing this TBH on Facebook. And I was like, TBH, what does that stand for? TBH. And I'm trying to figure out the words, what the heck TBH would stand for. So finally, after 6 months of seeing this, I messaged my son. I said, okay, what is this TBH? Like, what are you trying to say, you guys? Because that's all they were putting was TBH on their post. And he's like, Mom, it's to be honest. And I said, well, what do you guys got to lie about? Like, what are you all lying about?
the very first time in today's world that I came across LOL, I didn't realize it meant laughing out loud. LOL to me was lots of luck, you know. And so I was like, why are you saying lots of luck to me? Then I asked them, I said, no, laughing out, oh, or the other one, laughing my ass off out loud, And so it's like, so anyway, but we all have our language. It goes through generations. I understand that. And I got to slap myself every once in a while.
Yeah, we got to get into times, right? It's just like, yeah, I was just floored. I was like, what are you all lying about? Like, all of you guys are putting that out there. So what are you all hiding from us? Like, like, is there a big family secret that they don't want all the aunts and uncles to know? Like, I didn't know what was going on. It was.
Oh, yeah, but we had a few of them too. I can remember a few stories where I had to really hide something from my mom and dad or my brother. It's like, and I did pull it off. I told my brother, 40 years later, do you know that I lied about this to you about that watch?
Guilty conscience kicked in
Yeah.
after 40 years.
What watch did I give you? And I said, forget it.
There's your next screenplay, Bob. The 40-year conscience kicked in.
It's not a bad idea. I'll send myself a note for that. No,
So I'm gonna get back on track here. Tonight we're here for the book called The Tattoo Murder. Now, when I first heard the title, when Mickey first sent it to me, I thought it was about a tattoo shop. And then I started doing some research and I'm like, oh, that's not what that's about. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about what the tattoo murder is about?
Sure. The opening scene takes place over the picture behind me. If you look over my left shoulder, my left, not your left, you'll see a breaker out there. And just on the other side of that breaker, the opening scene, a bloated body washes up on shore. Now, that scene that you're looking at is actually in Ventura, California, which is about an hour out of Los Angeles, northwest, and between Los Angeles and Santa Barbara. And it's a coastal community that's just really nice. It's getting a little more expensive, but it's basically a lot of people might refer to it as a deadhead community because it's mainly for years and years and years been known for surfers and some drug houses, and it is also the corporate home of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang, and that is real life. And the story that is in the tattoo murder is it turns out that this body is a biker, and John Potenza, who's my main character, is a surfing cop. He loves to surf. He surfs at night. He's also a former veteran, combat veteran of the wars in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And he has his ladies, and he is an old school type of cop, young, handsome guy, but he is well respected. And the assignment is given to him to solve this murder. Well, the intrigue is it goes much deeper than that. The tattoo reference is one of the tattoo references is the body of the guy who's washed up on shore was a tattoo artist. And I can say this because it's revealed.
That's where that tattoo comes in.
Yeah, he was a tattoo artist who came up with a very specific tattoo of a plant that became all the rage. And so that's part of where that comes from. And I won't say anything more about that because he comes deeper than that. And the whole book is basically talks about his connections and the deepness of the intrigue of the crimes that are further than just this one murder. And one of his goals is because of this, he has to keep two motorcycle gangs from going to mattress or going to mat or going to war, basically. And that's one of the goals. And we go through historic Ventura. It was one of the mission cities of California. In the book, my wife is the photographer. We placed, I used 10 photographs of the actual places in Ventura where the fictional events, including the murder, took place.
Oh.
And so the cool thing about that is you get to see, if you've never been to Ventura, you still get to see some of the scenery that's actual and that we placed in there. And the other thing about it that is very unique that I've always wanted to do, and it turned out to be very successful, is we put every scene in the book is time stamped. So every scene in the book has the date, the time, where it is, and basically the scene where it's taking place. So you could, and it may be every 2 pages, maybe every 6 pages within the chapters. So basically, you can stop reading and know exactly where you are by that timestamp. And if you pick it up, say a day or so later. Whereas my Lancer books are designed to be read on a 6-hour flight back to New York from Los Angeles or vice versa. This book is much longer and much different. And the timestamp, I think, also helps because I don't know about you, but when I read a book, I'm always, when my eyes are starting to get tired, I look to see how far it is to the end of the chapter because I want to go to the end of the chapter. Well, with a timestamp, the next scene may be 1 page away, maybe 2 pages away, maybe 3. So you could stop there and still be within the chapter, but know where you left off, and also just be able to read 1 page of recap to bring you back to where you hope where you left off. So those are some of the unique things about the book and things that people really, really like about the book, which I'm happy for because those 2 concepts that I came up with that I've been thinking about for a long time and they worked.
Well, and I think it's really nice that you put the experience in there as well, right? In the timestamp. So it kind of brings it more realistic.
Yes.
Because before we went live, I asked you, was it a real murder or was it not? Right.
Right.
So by you doing that, you got the readers really engaged in getting into the book and asking that question, is it or is it not?
And there's some friends of mine who are people in the book. Of course, I changed their names. And there's I won't talk about one of the main criminals, but I'll let you figure that out for yourself. But the fact that it's motorcycles, surfing, nice ladies, I'll leave it at that, and crime, all mixed in with a bit of history, because there's a couple of scenes in the book which I know a couple of veterans described to me, and they said, they brought back some bad memories, because I do take him back at one point to his memories of being in Bosnia, which was an awful, awful war. I mean, I believe it's considered to be the very first war where government sanctioned rape as a weapon of war. And, it happened obviously in wars gone by, but governments didn't say, yeah, this is part of what we're doing as part of one of our acts of war. And he has to deal with that. And so there is that one section in there. It's pretty gruesome. And I've had a couple of guys tell me that it's not for the weak at heart, but it's what's there.
Well, it's not everybody's cup of tea, right?
That's right. Tea.
And you see how I do that, right? I just come in nice and smooth with a cup of tea. So, Bob, if I ask you what your tea is, what 3 words would you give me tonight?
Oh, wow. Yeah, we discussed this a little ahead of time. I think my tea would be thought, because when you do a book or a screenplay, you have to put a lot of thought into it. First of all, the thought is, do I really want to do this? And number two, how many times am I going to feel that rejection? Because these are businesses that if you can't take a rejection, don't get in. I think the E would be for energy. And because you have to have that energy to do it. Whether it's getting up and writing in the morning or writing at night or just getting down and doing it and building that energy, translating your energy into the spoken word or the written word or whatever you're doing. And the third easily has to be action. And you have to be able to just say, you can't procrastinate. You have to take action. And my wife calls me her Energizer Bunny, because I go from one, I'm always on, so to speak, and going, and I've got multiple projects usually going. And she always says she gets tired of seeing the back of my head in the office. But that's one thing you have to have. And so those three things, thought, energy, and action, I think are what I feel I bring and what I have to bring to every project that I do.
Well, it's you with the thought process, right? Do I want to do this? Do I want to be rejected? And you talked about rejection. A lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of rejection in filmmaking, in writing and screenwrites and all that. So I want to get into that because people don't talk about rejection. So,
right.
So let's talk about that a little bit, Bob.
Sure. It's writing a screenplay, first of all, is tough enough. Or writing a book is tough enough. And people say, well, how do you do it? I can't even get into it. What do I need to do? And I just tell them, you got to write. Just sit down and write. Write, the old adage is write what you know. That's a good place to start, because nothing a book doesn't get made unless somebody puts something on paper. You have to do it. It doesn't come out of the sky. It just doesn't fall. The ideas may, but you have to physically put it on paper. And so, that's the first step. And then, that even if you've written the world's greatest novel, if you've not been published before, if you've not sold anything before, you're still nobody, and getting that book or screenplay to the next person is always tough. You will get turned down lots of times. I remember years ago, there used to be a book that had all the publishers listed, and I was trying to break into writing. And I would send out maybe 50 letters and query letters. And if I got one back, chances are it was going to be no. But if I got one back, that was success, because it just getting a response, getting through the person who answers the phones, getting through the person who opens the mail, you ever get it to an agent's desk? I even had one good friend of mine. He's a dear friend. He's a pretty big agent in Hollywood. He doesn't handle writers, fortunately. He handles actors. And so we're talking one day, and I said, what about query letters? He goes, don't send them. He said, we don't read them. I says, I don't read query letters. There are other people who tell you, yeah, go ahead and send query letters. And if you at the time you want to do it, do it. I'm not saying don't do it. But he told me no, at least for him, And he said they're a waste of time. You've got to go out and meet people. You've got to, be in group. It helps to be in a group because, whether it's a writer's group where you can meet with people and get started, I have developed through my short films a crew that we all know each other, and they're the first guys I call, if I'm going to do something. If there's a part for them, I call them. They're in. They're my guys, and I'm their guy. And so it helps. But that's another thing you got to do. And because we're all together in this, because if you add up all the rejection that we've all had, it would, it'd be the fulcrum tipping the earth.
You got a good baseball game going on.
Yeah. And whether it's filmmaking, and then the next level up, you're going to get rejected. And then you got to go out and raise money and to produce your production, and you're going to get rejection there, and it's all about sales. And like I said, you could have written the greatest screenplay in the history of the world, but if you can't get it to somebody who likes it enough to, I guess one of the things is the one thing I hate about this business. Literally hate There are more people, and most people that I have talked to look for ways to say no before they look for ways to say yes. And that's scary. And it's because they get so much crap, handed to them that, they're finding someone to read a screenplay. Oh my gosh, that's really tough. I fortunately have a very dear friend of mine who is a produced filmmaker. It's been a long time for him, but he's 91 years old. He's sharp as a tack, and he will read my screenplays because he loves it. He loves it, and he will critique them, and he will make notes, and he will give me suggestions. And we get into it sometimes. It's like, no, I don't want that. No, that's not, but he's much more versed in the knowledge of that than I am, and than I probably will ever be. But it's all a learning experience. And Joe is just great. We went back. He called me just the other day and said, I came up with a new scene. He says, you might like this one. I hope you like the other. And the first scene, I loved it. I wrote it into my latest screenplay. The other one, I said, no, no,
Not happening.
no, it's my ending, not yours. And another, I had a friend tell me once that, everybody wants to rewrite your third act, and that is so true. But Joe, Joe asked me, he said, how do I know, how do I know that you'll lie? I said, I'll tell you. He goes, I just want to make sure I don't step over the line. And I said, I'll tell you, you stepped over the line. You know that. And if not, I'll tell you that point blank.
That's one thing I'm learning about having all these interviews with all these filmmakers and directors and producers. You got to be really straightforward, because if you just sugarcoat everything, you're just delaying time and you're wasting someone's time, right? And that's one thing that's my biggest pet peeve. Don't waste my time. My time is precious, right? If you're just going to come here and waste my time, then go somewhere else. Go to another table. I don't have time for that. And I'm learning that by having these conversations with all of you, like people like you, Bob, that are in the film industry, and that, time is precious, and you guys don't have time to be. It's like you said with the letters, the query letters. I got no time for that. So, get out there and communicate, start having conversations, text messages are so many misunderstandings. People don't understand feelings and emotions in there. And then you get big commotion going on. Just go out and have a conversation, have a cup of tea, have a coffee, have a beer, have a glass of wine, get out there. And, we're not doing that anymore. I'm finding that the world is just closing up and just screens. Everybody just wants to talk through the screen, right?
That is so much of the pandemic that we came through. It changed so many things. One of the things it really changed, I had a producer tell me, who's a very good friend of mine. He said, Bob, I used to go to 3 places in a day to talk to people. And he said it was really difficult because of LA traffic. One was here, one was Santa Monica, one was West Hollywood, one was in the San Fernando Valley. He said, now it's all screens. They just want to meet on Zoom or similar. And he said, you'd think that was good, but it's not, because you're not in the room. You're not in the room with them. And that's one of the pet peeves that actors were dealing with. And, they just ended the strike this last 24 hours. And one of the things they were dealing with is self-pitching and self-recording. Basically, what casting directors are doing now is they're asking you to do your sides, do your lines on your phone, and then send it to them. And so they can see all this without you being in the room and trying to persuade them. And it's like they want to see your talent. Well, a big part of this is you making your pitch about who you are, not just who your talent is. And it's very difficult when you're not in the room to get that across. And so many places, I mean, not everybody does it, but it's becoming more and more the norm. And actors hate it. They don't want to do it. They want to show up for an audition. They don't want to, do the audition because there's no notes. Usually if you're in the room with a casting director, they may look at you and say, can you tweak this a little bit? Can you drop the accent? Can you maybe give me an accent? But they can't do that if you send them, a 2-minute reel.
Yeah. there's no, you can't get any feedback, right? Or it's conversation and it takes hours because you got to wait for that text to come back, you got to wait for that message to come back, where you're in person you can
Conversation.
actually get it done, right?
One of my pet peeves is we don't do conversation anymore. I spoke in a class to a company once, and that was my big thing. I said, at that time, I said, texting is just BS if you're,
Yep.
trying to have a conversation with somebody. Look me in the eye, talk to me.
Yep.
I don't really want to see 5 words on my phone. Now we have to do it all the time, but I mean, conversation. But it's unfortunately we've gotten away from that.
Yeah, I always get, Miss Liz, what are you mad for? I'm not mad. Why do you think I'm mad? I'm straightforward. I don't know how to. Is there an emotion or something that I need to do with the letters? Like, do they have to be in a certain font that you guys don't think I'm mad? Like, I'm just very straightforward. Like, so yeah, there's a lot of miscommunication going on there. Um, and thank you for sharing that, Bob, because I am so big on conversation. I like conversation, and this is why this platform is here, is to have the conversation. I get my biggest pet peeves is short podcasts, and I know I'm going to get attacked, and a lot of yous are going to come at me. But how can you know somebody in 10 minutes? How can you understand the conversation between a total stranger in 10 minutes? Unless you want to date the person, well, then like speed dating or whatever you're doing. I don't know what you.
I remember
I'm old school. I'm a grandma. I like the long conversation and I like to get to know my guests.
when I first started podcasting, the norm was an hour because it was that travel time. It takes most people an hour to get to work, and they can listen on their way to work or on the way home. And then it started getting shorter with more podcasts because you couldn't get through the noise. And it was everybody was doing podcasts. There was so many, and it was and you had to spend money to advertise and to get a listenership, get some numbers built up. And then it started going shorter and shorter. And I think I'm hearing more because of true crime podcasts and things where I'm hearing more now of 30-minute podcasts or even hour-long podcasts like yours. And I think that, it's come full circle. And it may go back to short ones again at some point too. There are some that, it's okay to be shorter. It's definitely just information for the day. But, it's like, I want to spend a half hour. I mean, there are certain NPR podcasts that I listen to, and they're, at least a half hour or an hour. And I enjoy them because it takes me an hour to get home from work or an hour to get to work, so.
Yeah, anything under 30 minutes, I'm like, I'll just listen to music. I'll put the radio on and listen to music instead. Like, I don't know how you are doing it, and I know I'm going to get a lot of hate mail. Miss Liz really doesn't care. Miss Liz likes the longer podcast. My listening audience is between 46 and 91, so I'm going with the longer ones. you know, Bob, I want to get into the film that you made about the 1970, I think 1971.
One earthquake, sure.
Yeah, let's talk about that because I did not know about that earthquake, and I was mad at myself because I was like, "What? I did not know."
Well, the thing about the 71 earthquake, I was a senior at Somar High School, and I was working at a local grocery store part-time, and the earthquake happened February 9th, 1971. And it was another one USGS seismologist we spoke to had on in the film, called it the most important earthquake in U.S. history because of the timing, because of everything that happened and what would happen afterwards, all the things that were developed afterwards, whether it was search and rescue dogs, search and rescue teams, citizen emergency response teams, earthquake insurance in California. Those were all things that were developed because of the Somar earthquake. It was a 6.5, I believe. I have to check back and see, but it was massive. It happened at 6 o'clock in the morning, 6:02, and it shook us out of bed. It was a school day. It was a Tuesday, and I mean, I literally, at that point, I was 16. I was 17, and I was in bed, and the first thing I thought of, to be very honest with you, is nuclear attack. I'll just roll over and die in bed because it's not going to make any difference. And as I start to roll over, I maybe got a half second sleep, and I hear my mother across the hall yelling, "Get out! Get under the bed! Get on! Earthquake! Earthquake!" I said, "All right." So I roll. Next thing I knew, I was on the floor. I didn't have much of a choice. And the biggest thing for me at that point was we were always taught in school, nuclear attack, whatever, which I'm sure did a lot of good, duck and cover. And so I did that instinctively. Well, if I hadn't done that, there was a very large TV to my right, sitting just loose on a stand, on the little metal stands, and that fell over. If I continued laying prone, because I tried to get under the bed the first thing, and I couldn't. It was too big. I was too big to get under the bed. So I laid prone, then I did the duck and cover. If I'd have stayed laying prone, that TV would have fell and hit me in the back of the head, and I'd probably been killed, at least seriously injured, but probably dead. And as it turns out, when we did the interviews, since so many of the people are still alive, I went to high school with in Sylmar. They live in Southern California. In Sylmar, still some of them. I put on Facebook that I wanted to interview people for this documentary, and we got a good response. And a lot of more guys that I knew, women and girls that I knew, and they came out, and almost to a T, they all said they thought it was a nuclear attack. Every one of them. They thought the Russians were bombing us. That was finally, we were at war, and the Russians had launched a nuclear attack. Every one of us. And then we all realized very shortly after that, no, it's an earthquake. We live in Southern California, but we were earthquake virgins. We had never been through an earthquake before. And, I came from Pennsylvania. And so, we went on and did the documentary, and it's really two parts. We go on, and we were fortunate enough to be able to use a lot of government footage that is now public domain of scenes at the time that were shot for a government documentary. So we used a lot of that. We did a lot of interviews. We interviewed a lot of the firemen, those who were actually involved, and many of them obviously passed away. And because it was 50 years when we did it, 50 years afterwards, and some of these guys were in their 80s and 90s, and some have since passed away. And we interviewed them. We interviewed other people. We interviewed experts and USGS people, and used a lot of that government documentary, and told the story in the first 40 minutes. And the last 20 minutes was what happens if this happens again. And there have been studies for the state of California, and we had the guy who did the study on from Berkeley, and also one of the chief guys from the governor's office, Chief Larry Collins, fire chief, who came down to spend his time with us, who was involved in it. And basically, if we have another 6.9 or so earthquake on the southern San Andreas Fault, which is south of LA, if we had that on a normal day, we would have 30,000 fires that would break out. And most of them, the vast majority, there'd be no response because we don't have the people, the manpower, or the equipment to put them out. They would have to just burn. If it happened on a Santa Ana wind day, we have these massive Santa Ana winds that everybody knows about. If it happened on that day, we'd be facing in Southern California 300,000 fatalities.
Wow.
And this is all documented. I mean, because the fires, first of all, the fires would be massive, and people would just be gone. The grasslands, we have such an interface in Southern California between wildland and urban that it's like a matchstick if that happens. And we just don't have the equipment or the people, the bodies to, do much about it. One of the things they are doing now is they're trying to put electrical power, the lines underground, which will help because you won't have these massive towers that'll fall over in such an earthquake, or could fall over. Everyone wouldn't fall over, but So that's basically that story that we told. It's on Amazon Prime. You can get it there. You can also see it on Tubi for free if you don't mind watching the commercials. And but it's a great story. It's a documentary that I've wanted to do since the day it happened. And for me, it was I worked at a grocery store, like I said. We talk about that too, of what is no longer on a shelf during a 6+ earthquake at a grocery store. There's nothing, and somebody has to clean it up. And I was one of those box boys, which we used to call ourselves, who at $1.60 an hour. Excuse me, $1.62. I was union, and we cleaned it up, and it was like I cleaned up the canned goods aisle myself. And in the canned goods aisle, you have bottles of ketchup, mustard, mayonnaise, pickle juice, vinegar, oil, all that stuff. Balsamic, you name it, it's all there. And once you got the cans up, you were standing in a juice, probably about this deep, of all those combinations. I couldn't eat a hamburger for 6 months. I literally could not stand the smell of a hamburger for 6 months. And then I cleaned up the liquor department myself and got drunk on the fumes.
Well, it was in the air, right? It was an air drunk.
I had to go outside and stand for about 30 minutes in the 2 o'clock in the morning air, and just to sober up. I had never been drunk before, and it was an amazing experience. I can tell you that. The other part of that too is one of my friends, one of my dear friends. He was the one who found his mom's body at one of the hospitals. She was a nurse. And we brought him in. Dave said he'd come in and do it. And he talked about it. He related that story and how his life totally changed from that moment on, and was never anywhere where he should have been or would have been if that hadn't happened. And we had, almost 70 people die in that earthquake, and 2 hospitals collapsed. So, but major changes were made in Southern California and in California, period, as far as earthquakes were concerned in the aftermath. Some of them took about 10 years, but others didn't. And all the stuff that you now see during an earthquake in the aftermath or in a major disaster, search dogs, all that kind of stuff, that came from the Soma earthquake. That was developed because of the Soma earthquake.
Wow. Yeah, when I seen that, I was like, how come I don't know about this one? Like, I'm a real geek when it comes to stuff. I'm always like storms, watching how life changes, right? How cars are built. I'm an old car junkie too. I like the older cars, and I'm just like, the cars they make today is like little plastic toys. Like, come on, there's no detail to them. There's no character to them. Like,
Maybe a 47 Oldsmobile any day.
yeah. I'm an old Mustang girl. Like, I want to repurpose a car, like an old car. Like, I like to get dirty and like, I'm not just a fancy dancy tea lady here. Like, I like the old vintage stuff. I like the history behind everything.
I learned something the other day. I want to tell you, speaking of which, cars. We all know that you can pop the clutch on a stick shift to get it started if the alternator is dead or whatever. We had an incident the other day, and the car was facing uphill, and it was a stick. It was a Honda. And my friend, the battery or the alternator was dead. He couldn't start it. Here it is, 12:30 in the morning, right? And my stepdaughter was there, and she said, well, can you pop the clutch? I said, the car's facing up. She goes, can I roll it? I said, the car's facing uphill. She goes, oh, okay. I said, there's no way you're going to push it, And so we looked at each other and said, you ever tried popping it in reverse? And I said, I don't know. Have you ever done that, Louis? He goes, no, I've never heard of that. I said, are you game? It's your car. He goes, yeah, why not? I said, it's better than calling the auto company at 12:30, auto club at 12:30 in the morning, because I have to re-up my auto club. And sure enough, I got in, turned it on, let it roll 20 feet, popped that clutch, and it started right up.
Oh, well, look at that, eh?
So, yeah, I was like, I learned at my age, I learned something new, something physical new. You could pop it in reverse.
Right. And the old cars, they had character too. Like, you could do stuff to them. Like, and they were heavy. They were made heavy. They were stern. They weren't these little plastic toys.
What was your first car?
My first car was a Pontiac in
Really?
1979.
Mine was a 63 Bonneville.
Wow. Yeah,
Big
mine was
old,
peacock green.
yeah.
Everybody's like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah."
Mine, you could put 7 bodies in the trunk.
See, they had style back then. We could take it down to another tattoo murder, right?
There you go.
So if anybody would like to get your books and know more about you, Bob, how can they find you?
The easy thing is, first of all, Amazon is there. You know that. You can also go to bobbrillbooks.com. That's my site. I would send you out one. TuscanyBayBooks.com, which is my publisher for that particular book. My publisher for the last couple of Lancer books is a different publisher, and it's my publicist is going to kill me.
I'm gonna get in trouble. Am I getting in trouble?
Put, Putnam, Putnam Publishing, and the and and you can anytime if you Google me, if you Google Bob Brill, just the words Bob Brill, I will come up usually 17 of the top 20 searches, and somewhere in there. I'm not Bob Brill, the IP attorney in Chicago. I'm not Bob Brill, the drummer for Berlin. I'm not Bob Brill, who is the Tony Award-winning set designer on Broadway, and I'm definitely not Bob Brill, the bodybuilder. That dude's just like muscles everywhere. But I'll come up always number one, and usually somewhere 15, 17 out of the top 20. So if you Google me, I'm out there. I'm easy to find, and feel free to do that. But Bob Brill Books and bobbrill.com and the other sites as well. So.
Well, awesome. Well, I had an awesome time talking. Like I could talk to you all night, but I know you got a hockey game to get to. So
Oh yeah.
I'm just like, okay, hockey over, Miss Liz. I got it. So what's your final message for everybody tonight, Bob, before we wrap up?
If you want to be a writer, just keep writing. Just sit down and do it. And it doesn't matter how old you are. Don't think your life has passed. I will tell you, I'm 70, and I'm looking at being just over past halfway in my life. And just do it. Don't ever, retiring is one thing. I don't know if I can ever really retire, but people, I think, need to just keep on doing it. Don't let the fear of Alzheimer's or any of that other stuff overtake you. Keep active, keep busy, and don't stop, because you only get one life, and you want to live it to the fullest. And there are times to relax, and you can sleep when you're dead. So what can I tell you?
Or you could get an old car like Bob had before and put 7 bodies in there, and we'll start a whole new series of books.
And buy books, buy physical books, please buy physical books.
I know, right? I'm a physical book girl, man. I like reading online, but then I'm like, I need the book. I need to hold it. There's just something about holding a book and reading it. It really does make a difference.
And people often wonder, they say, you do this for fun, enjoyment. Yeah, but you know what? It'd be nice we also do it for our living, I've gotten some checks from publishers that were 1 cent, and I've gotten some 29-cent checks. Sure, it's going to happen, but it'd be nice to get one that had 3 numbers to the left of the decimal point once in a while. we do it for a living, and we do it for enjoyment and for fun, and because we have stories to tell. But respect for the authors is also a good thing, and so purchase a physical book. It's gift season.
Right? Christmas time's coming. Get some books out there. Have a glass of beer, or have a bottle and glass of wine, Christmas eggnog, and read a story together. You just never know what you.
Oh my gosh. I always get my first eggnog right around this time of year.
He's like, just Lauren. You're telling your wife, we got to get eggnog now.
With or without the brandy, I'm good.
Well, it was a real pleasure having you, Bob. I really had I had a great time. I want to thank all the viewers and tuners that have tuned in tonight. If you're watching a replay, push hashtag replay. Let me know where you're tuning in from, because I always like to know where you're tuning in from. And if you'd like to see something on Tea Time and you haven't seen it yet, let Miss Liz know. Just give me a quick message. And again, I want to thank Mickey Mickelson from Creative Edge for giving me Bob tonight. Without Mickey's help, I would not have these incredible guests. So until then, I will see you next Thursday, same time, same place, 10, 3, and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with 3 new TEAs for all of you to enjoy.